it's obviously good. This is fiber to what can otherwise be, high sugar conversation, that it's just
Yeah.
sound bites. But actually, I think people need to interrogate some of this and go and research some things. I think there's plenty for people to chew on, which is amazing. Are we getting sicker in a world obsessed with wellness?
You think about how many people you see out jogging and gym memberships, and you look at all the data, and we are more obsessed now with certainly fitness than we've ever been. And remember that jogging and aerobics were only invented in the 60s. It was invented after I was born. You know what I mean? So it's a real modern thing. People actually deliberately putting on trainers and going for a run. Didn't happen, until Cooper came along and in Brazil coined the phrase aerobics in the 60s. So we are obsessed more now than ever with fitness, but statistically, yeah, we're the most unhealthy we've ever been, which does sound a bit of a paradox, doesn't it?
What do you feel you need to rail against, Steve?
I've written a few books. My latest one's called The Insulin Problem. And if you look from the very first one I wrote, which was Primal Cure, through to Britney's Sick, through to Fat and Furious, which is my own story about the fact that I was fat for 30 years and furious when I found out that, the reason I stayed fat for all those years wasn't because I was lazy. I was one of those fat joggers that you see everywhere. I was training more then than I do now. And then through to the fiber first diet, and then more recently, the insulin problem. What we've come to realize, and we touched on it at the very beginning in the first book, where I said ancestral precedents. We should eat and move in a way that we're designed to eat and move, because evolution's a slow thing, right? Evolution takes a very, very long time. You can't quantify how long it takes, but we know it takes a long time, because if it didn't, then within a few generations of people moving from, say, India to the UK, they would have white skin to adapt for the fact that you need a light skin to absorb sunlight for vitamin D. So we know evolution takes a long time. So you look at ancestral precedents and you go, well, we need to move more like we used to. Well, that's probably why people are jogging a lot now, because we used to certainly chase down animals and chase our dinner and run away from tribes that were trying to get us. But then you look at the food and you go, well, actually, that's probably our biggest gap. What we eat today is not what we're designed to eat. So even if we're starting to try and move more like we used to, and that's where you see everybody exercising, the biggest gap from where we should be is in what we eat. So while we're seeing more and more people training and exercising and quite rightly hitting the gym, there's a belief that you can out-exercise the fork. You can out-exercise your diet, and it's just simply not true. So if I give a quick example, last time I ran the London Marathon, I was wires everywhere, recording everything, and I only burnt 2,800 calories. Right?
Yeah.
So people overcompensate. You'd think, well, you must be burning a lot more than that. So then you finish the run, and then within a few hours you've overcompensated, and you've had your McDonald's, you treated yourself to your pizza or whatever it is, and within a couple of hours you've probably, as far as energy concerned, overcompensated. So I've got this real simple rule that says exercise is really, really important for sure, but it is not the answer if you're trying to lose weight or get healthy. That's got to be done in the diet, and that's got to become into your nutrition and things like that. But then it goes further than that, because all the sort of research done in the last couple of years, traveling the world, meeting doctors and scientists and being in laboratories and actually seeing fat cells and how they grow and how they shrink. We've come to realize that insulin not only prevents weight loss, but elevated insulin for too long is the prime reason for heart disease, most cancers. It's the prime reason, obviously, for type 2 diabetes. It's the number one reason for polycystic ovary syndrome. It's a major contribution to erectile dysfunction, Alzheimer's, and the list just goes on and on and on. And so elevated insulin, what we call hyperinsulinemia, is the root of all evil in terms of diseases, but it is also the thing that stops you getting to weight loss. So anything you can do to bring your insulin down. Now, obvious things are food. Choose foods that don't put your insulin up. But also things that put your insulin up are things like too much stress in your life, because stress puts up cortisol, cortisol puts up blood sugar. Elevated blood sugar means you need more insulin. So stress, not getting a good night's sleep, certain medications will put your insulin up. So you've got to learn about what triggers insulin to be released, and therefore bring your insulin down before all the good things can happen. So you might be exercising like crazy, but if your goal is weight loss, you can exercise as much as you want. In fact, you probably over exercise, which will put your cortisol levels up and actually be counterproductive to weight loss and, the body shape everybody's sort of chasing. So long answer there, Jack, to probably not the question. But yeah, that's the principle. And the latest book, The Insulin Problem, I based it on two really big interviews I did. One with Professor Ben Bickman in the States, who is a professor that looks at fat cells. That's probably most of his day. He's in his laboratory looking at fat cells. How do we shrink those fat cells? And then a wonderful doctor in the UK called Dr. Isabella Cooper, who's at the Westminster University Hospital in London, who pretty much is a cancer specialist. And I basically took all these long interviews that I did with them over the years and went, right, how do I translate this into something that people will understand? Because they get quite technical, these people. And the latest book is all about that. You cannot lose weight till you drop your insulin. And if you can drop your insulin, your chances, your likelihood of most of these diseases start to diminish.
A lot of people will, I think, look to things like insulin or look to things like hormones to maybe justify not doing the work. I can't change anything. I've got type 2 diabetes. I've got this medical condition. I should be using GLP-1. There's no point in me exercising because I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I've heard this. I've heard that. Insulin sounds scary. We know that insulin needs to be injected, for instance, if you need that as a treatment to diabetes. And, as somebody who is around bodybuilders, the idea of injecting things and syringes and, I've had bad blood draws. I don't want to be anywhere near needles. That kind of scares me. So if I hear insulin, I'm thinking, oh, that's bigger than I can possibly comprehend. How can we kind of gently get people to the
Yeah.
on-ramp of
Yeah.
reducing insulin?
Yeah. So first of all, what we're saying is we die without insulin, right? It's a Goldilocks hormone. So we have to have some, because the biggest danger, this is what most people don't understand, and I wish we taught this in schools. I wish we taught it to most doctors, for sure. So in our 5 litres of blood, our 8 pints of blood, the amount of sugar, which we call glucose when it's in the blood, the amount of sugar that we can have in there is very, very, very small. If you have more than 1 teaspoon of sugar in your body, and let's say you were fasted and you went for a blood test, if it was about 1.5 teaspoons, and repeatedly it was 1.5 teaspoons, that is the diagnosis for type 2 diabetes. So that's how little room we have to maneuver. And if you have 3 teaspoons of sugar in your bloodstream, it can kill you immediately, right? So we're eating lots of sugar. We're eating lots of things that turn into sugar, the bread, the pasta, the rices, and so on. So the body uses insulin to bring that sugar back within that 1 teaspoon level. And that's what insulin's main job is. There's a lot of other things as well. It's probably the boss hormone in the body, but its number one most critical role is to manage that blood sugar level. So you've got I use teaspoons of sugar because people can visualize it. Once you start talking grams, it's hard to visualize. So I want people to realize that you have to have insulin because its job is to make sure you don't die by your blood sugar levels going too high. And that's why type 1 diabetics inject insulin, because a type 1 diabetic is where their insulin production in the pancreas has stopped working. So they have to inject with insulin to manage their blood sugar levels. In some rare cases, a type 2 diabetic will also have to inject insulin. It's way over prescribed because in the old days, doctors thought that's what you needed to do. But for most people that are type 2, it's their body hasn't stopped producing it. It's just that for so many years, they've eaten too many carbs or, overly stressed or not sleeping enough, all these things putting your insulin level up, that the cells have stopped listening to it. So a type 2 diabetic is where your insulin has been elevated for so long that you've been knocking on the door of the fat cell saying, taking the sugar, and the insulin has been so high for so long, the cells have stopped listening. So that's type 2 diabetes, very different to type 1. So elevated insulin for too long will drive type 2 diabetes, but it will also drive certain cancers, certainly breast cancer, prostate cancer. It's probably, we think now, the number one cause of Alzheimer's, which is really, really where I come into this, because my mum's got terrible Alzheimer's and my dad is a type 2 diabetic. So I'm spending a lot of money and time and research around the Alzheimer's, and we're pretty confident now that elevated insulin is probably the number one reason for Alzheimer's now, which is quite interesting. So I'm back to giving it in plain English, Jack. So too high blood sugar for too long means elevated insulin. Elevated insulin stops you losing body fat, burning body fat as fuel, because its job is to keep your blood sugar low. So the last thing it wants to do is turn body fat back into energy. Once you bring your insulin down, so you're on a ketogenic diet, you're eating mainly just, meats and the things that don't have lots and lots of sugars in, then all of a sudden your insulin is low. And if you run out of energy, your body will turn body fat back into fuel. So give an experiment. I've done lots of experiments. We can talk about any that you want to talk about, but the last big one I did was a London Marathon after a 9-day total fast. So I ran it fasted. And of course, if I'm running it fasted, the only fuel I can be using is body fat to fuel the run. But I had no problem doing that because there was virtually no insulin in the body, because it didn't need to be there because I hadn't eaten anything. Insulin, we think it's a good thing because we're here, type 1s have to inject it, but too much of it is a bad thing, and too much of it for too long drives disease, and too much of it at any time will stop you burning body fat.
Okay, so I think that's really helpful, and the distinction between type 1, type 2 diabetes is interesting. The other diabetes that people might be aware of, I don't know how much of this you've covered, is gestational diabetes. So this is during pregnancy.
So there's 2 times, the 2 P's actually, there's 2 times the body wants to be insulin resistant.
Yeah.
Right? Puberty and pregnancy.
Yeah.
Think what those both are. They're both the same thing. Growth. These are times when you need super growth. In other words, you've got to put on weight. So to put on weight, this is exactly what insulin wants to do. So your body becomes insulin resistant in pregnancy and puberty, but that is on purpose. That's what it's trying to do. Of course, it can go too far, and then we see gestational diabetes as a diagnosis. But those are 2 times that you actually want elevated insulin: when you're trying to put on weight, when you're trying to grow. The rest of the time, when you're not in puberty or you're not pregnant, you want to keep your insulin as low as possible, because that's the only way you can burn body fat. And it's the number one cause of virtually every chronic disease. So I've got this tree called the tree of insulin resistance. And what it's got insulin resistance as the trunk.
Yeah.
And then imagine all the branches at the top, all the things you worry about: cancers, diabetes, Alzheimer's, PCOS for women, erectile dysfunction, even migraines, gout. I mean, the list is virtually everything you can imagine as the branches of the tree, insulin resistant, the trunk driving it. But then you've got to look at the roots, and the roots are too much sugar, the wrong types of foods, stress, sleep. All these things will put your insulin up. And I came up with this tree as a way of trying to make it simple for people to understand. But it's grown so quickly, this tree. It was shown in the White House when they were doing Make America Healthy Again. It's been shown in the House of Lords. Swiss Re, the world's largest life reinsurance company, who insure all the life insurance companies, are now using my tree to explain to people that, if you can cut your insulin down, A, if you're trying to lose weight, it's the number one thing you can do. But B, if you're just trying to avoid chronic disease, it's also the number one thing you can do.
Yeah. Bodybuilders might be another population who try to put on weight. And you'll often hear insulin sensitivity as a phrase there, because they're eating so much. The more muscle mass you have, also, the more blood sugar you can take out. Am I right?
Yep.
In thinking that? So.
Muscles under load, under tension, will soak up blood sugar without the need for insulin. That's why, a post-meal walk where you're using your glutes and your big muscles is great, because what will happen is, as a muscle is being exercised, it does not need insulin to take the sugar, and it uses something called GLUT4. And bodybuilders, anybody exercising quite a lot, one of the great things is you then don't need as much insulin to get rid of the sugar in the body.
If you were to be on a course of GLP-1s and not exercise, then it's likely you will lose muscle mass. You'll potentially lose bone density. So you could argue that you're definitely losing body mass there, and it's not all just fat. And the consequences of that could be deleterious to your health. So there does need to be exercise alongside intervention, doesn't there, or not?
100%. If anybody's on a GLP-1, first of all, I'm not anti-GLP-1s. I think they're way overprescribed. What I'm really anti is people taking a GLP-1 without knowing exactly what it is, how it works, what it's doing to the body. And for just a tiny percent of people, it might be the right thing to do to take a GLP-1. If they've tried everything, there's lots of food noise, they've got food addiction going on, they've just been diagnosed as type 2 diabetes, they're morbidly obese, great. Go and have a GLP-1 by all means, but we've got to educate people at the same time. Because firstly, there is lots of data to say that people that are overweight, while they're overweight, they're actually overfed but undernourished. In other words, quite often, the people that have got the most weight to lose are the ones not hitting the vitamins, the minerals, the omegas that they need already because the diet is so poor. So if you just take a diet where you're consuming, let's say, 4,000 calories a day, that's a really poor diet, and now all you're doing is crashing that right down to a couple of hundred calories a day, but the same food, you're even worse off nutritionally now because that little bit of omega-3 you've got is even less. That's the first thing I'd like to say there, Jack. But you're absolutely right. Up to 40% of weight loss on a GLP-1 is bone and muscle, which is horrific because it's dead quick to lose the muscle. And you will know because the space you're in is bloody hard, pardon my French. It's really hard to put muscle back on. You can lose it much quicker than you can put it back on. So now we've got a scenario. Let's say somebody's lost 10 kilos on a weight loss jab. But let's say 40% of that was muscle. Well, now they're going to put the weight back on because all the data suggests as soon as you stop, this is data from Oxford University, within 18 months, virtually everybody's back to where they were before. But now they're back to where they were weight-wise, but without the muscle. So they've got back to the weight they were, but they've got more body fat than ever because they lost the muscle. And we know that muscle burns a lot more energy than body fat does. And therefore, you've got a slower metabolism, you've got more body fat. So this is why if you are on a GLP-1, it is absolutely crucial that you do some exercise. You've got to exercise probably more than you've ever exercised before because you've got to protect that muscle.
Yeah. If you walk after a meal, you could improve your health outcomes.
If you're quite sedentary at the moment and you want to introduce, let's say, one walk a day after your main meal, would be the best time to do it because you will make your muscles soak up any carbs, sugar that you've eaten without the need for insulin. So a big difference.
Yeah.
And a real shameless plug. I don't know when this is coming out, Jack, but I've just written a video course. It's a 7-day video course called GLME1, which is for people that are coming off the GLPs to try and explain all the things that we're talking about here. What is life like after the jab? And how do you protect that muscle mass? How do you, stop the food noise? Because when you come off it, a lot of people lose the weight quite quickly because all of a sudden the food addictions disappear, and they are food addictions. Virtually everybody that's overweight, we might use nicer words around it rather than addiction, but are addicted to something, and it's normally a carb-related food or a processed food. And I've been involved for the last 2 years with the Food Addiction Conference in London, sponsored it for the last 2 years, and really close now to the World Health Organization, accepting the fact that food addiction is no different to nicotine addiction, no different to alcohol addiction, heroin addiction. It's just an addiction. But worse than probably any of those because we have to eat. We don't have to smoke, we don't have to drink, we don't have to take heroin, but we do have to eat. So, the food industry are massively to blame to deliberately getting us addicted to things that aren't good to our health. And so what my course is trying to do is help people as they transit off the GLP-1s, not put the weight back on.
Did you know that each episode of Fitness and Thinking takes about 10 hours to put together, from getting in touch with the guests to hosting the conversation to editing and then promoting? And so far, there is not any sponsorship or funding going into it. It is just time and energy from yours truly. And I feel very fortunate to do it. But it only grows if people engage with it. And it could be to say that you dislike something as much as liking something. Even just leaving a thumbs up is better than no interaction at all. And subscribing is one of the biggest things you can do, so you don't miss out on all of the experts, practitioners, and generally great people that I'm lucky enough to get to chat to most weeks that we do this. I wonder if we kind of thread a needle through everything we've discussed so far, Steve, because I feel there's so much here.
Yeah.
Insulin is an essential hormone.
Yes.
Yep, it's something that we need. It's something that operates in most bodies from day one. And for the most part, it's something that you might manage through a diet intervention, and ideally that would be supported with exercise.
There are some really good drugs for type 2, like metformin, that, you know, I'm normally very cautious of ever promoting any drug, because drugs are manufactured and therefore nearly always have a side effect. But if you're a type 2 diabetic, yes, get your diet right, get moving, get exercising, but you still might need a bit of help. And ideally that would come in the form of something like a metformin, whereas a type 2 diabetic rarely should be taking insulin, because the problem is the insulin sensitivity. In other words, you're insulin resistant because you've had too much insulin, therefore you're adding more fuel to the fire. And unfortunately, certainly the older GPs out there just do not understand this. So a lot of the younger doctors coming through more recently in med school get this. But if you're on insulin injections for type 2 diabetes, I'd be going back to my doctor going, I've just heard this guy say that might not be the best course of medication for me.
Sure. And then when it comes to macronutrients, so I don't think you vilified carbohydrates outright, but there could be an issue with ultra processed carbs, with foods that are high in sugar. The very basic thing for most healthy people is that if you eat more than you need, you'll put weight on.
So if you don't mind me pull you up on that, Jack.
Go on.
So if you eat more calories than you're expending,
Yep.
you will put weight on.
Sure.
If you eat less calories than you're expending, you might not lose weight. And here's the reason. This is why the calorie model breaks down, right? So the calorie model breaks down because we are not a machine. We have hormones. So what will happen is, let's say your body needs 2,000 calories a day constant. Well, in fact, you're talking to bodybuilders. Let's say you need 3,000 calories a day because you're doing lots of exercise to fuel your body, but you want to lose weight. So you come down to 2,000 calories a day.
Mm-hmm.
If you still need 3,000 calories a day, what's going to happen? Well, you'll think you'll lose weight. That's not what happens. If your insulin's high, you can't lose weight because your insulin's high. So what happens is now your body will bring your expenditure down to match to the 2,000. You'll feel more tired. It'll change your heart rate. It'll make you lethargic. It will try and match it. Then you'll say, well, then if that's true, how would a GLP-1 work? Well, now what's happening is they're coming down the calories so much that something has to give. And then you will lose weight. But that calorie restriction model of just 400 or 500, 600 calories a day does not work. It's never worked for anybody because of homeostasis. The body will go, I don't want to lose weight. So what I'll do is I'll drop my outgoing energy, be more tired, more lethargic, change body temperature, heart rates change, and so on, to try and match the fact that I've dropped that small amount of calories. So it does work on the way up, but not on the way down.
Talk to me about this, just because I went from a fluffy look to a very lean look. Yeah. And there was 3 to 4 kilos of weight lost. Measurements suggested with a DEXA-like scan and a tape measure that I hadn't lost too much muscle mass.
Good.
I would have lost some, of course I would. I would have lost glycogen, I would have lost water. So I agree with you to that extent that when we think of losing weight and cutting calories, that we could cut calories and our weight could be the same for a period of time, in part because water and glycogen behave differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely can understand that as part of what you're saying.
So what I'm saying is, when you lost your weight, if you'd been dropping the calories, but your carbs and your sugar was still high, therefore your insulin was high, it's almost impossible. But if you're dropping the calories by a couple of hundred calories a day and your insulin's low and well regulated, now yours could be because you're exercising, probably quite relaxed, probably sleeping well, and most of what you're eating is good food, then a drop in calories will obviously lose the weight because your insulin's not high. But if your insulin's high and you just try and drop 400 or 500 calories a day and your insulin's high, it's almost impossible to lose weight. And that's where people struggle.
If you have a poor diet, if you have a diet that causes high insulin, and you just cut your calories, but you don't change the proportion of nutrients or lack of nutrients that you're getting, then you're going to be worse off. I'm going to imagine things like your rice and your salmon, and I don't know where you stand on fruit, but I'm an advocate for fruit. If you're eating stuff like this and you bring your calories down, so you still have the proportion of good nutrients, your micronutrients, all this good stuff, that's when we see the outcomes that we want. But yeah, we need to make sure that it is nutritious stuff that we're ingesting for the results that we want. Steve, talk to me about your journey from furious to seeming relatively calm.
I spent 30 odd years building my companies, and I've always had, between 500 and 3,000 employees work for me. And in all those years while I was building the companies, I was exercising like crazy. My sport used to be dinghy sailing. I was pretty good at it. So I was always quite fit up till sort of early 20s, then started my own company, working really hard, lots of hours, but still exercising. I used to run a lot more then than I do now. So exercise fanatic, but after about 15 years, I went for my annual checkup, which I had to have for, key man insurance. And I'd been putting on the weight a bit, but it's okay. It's only a little bit. It's only a little bit. And then the one year my doctor went, you're obese. I went, get out of town. I'm not obese. I'm just carrying a little bit of weight. She said, no, you have 32% body fat. That's like obese. I have to write that on your medical form. And I'm like, I'm furious because, I'm doing all the things I'm told. I'm cooking at home where I can, going low fat this, low fat that, exercising like crazy. And I was furious. And then I was staying. Part of my company, we do gemstone jewelry, and part of the role I used to like as the founder was to go and stay with the Maasai in Kenya and Tanzania looking for gemstones. And on one visit, I was with the Maasai, this guy called Philip, and I was training for a marathon about a month out. And one morning, I went out the compound to go running. And he come over and he grabbed me. He said, "You can't, it's too dangerous. Elephants." I went, no, I'm going anyway. So I went for a run. And then that afternoon, he caught a goat and he killed this goat and he cooks it and he passes it to me and I take the fat off. And he said in sort of broken English, he said, "Oh, Mr. Steve, Mr. Big Fat Westerner Steve," because he thinks all Westerners want to be fat because that's all the images they ever see of us. He goes, "Mr. Steve, Mr. Big Fat Westerner, you run in the morning and you take the fat off to be big fat Western man." And I, no, I do it because I want to be lean like you. And he went, "Mr. Steve, ain't no working." Ain't no working. And I thought, hang on a minute. I've got all these doctors telling me what I should be doing. And this Maasai guy who looks absolutely amazing, he's going, "Why are you running? Why are you taking the fat off?" And I came back and I said to my wife, and I came back and my wife said, "Oh, by the way, I've just found out we're pregnant." I'm like, oh, shit. I was just turning 50 and I'd already got 6 kids. So this was number 7 on the way after a big gap. And I went, oh. And I just broke down. I went, I'm not going to be around to see this one grow up, because I'm overweight. I'm trying all this stuff. And the company was going well. And I went into work on the Monday morning and I went, "Guys, you run the company. We'll put some more directors in. I'm just going to go and work on my health for a year." So I stopped working on a day-to-day basis. I locked myself in a gym with somebody that understood low carbs was just starting to be a thing then, and people starting to realize don't fear the fat, which is what I'd feared for all these years. Low fat yogurt, low fat this, that, and the other. And I locked myself away with 3 doctors, a load of nutritionists, personal trainers, and we just worked on me for about 12 months. Within about a month, the weight had started to fall off, and that's when I started to write the first book. And life's now quite straightforward. And it is, the first book was called Primal Cure, which back then I thought it's all about being primal. It's about being, moving like we're supposed to, lifting heavy things. And probably only 1% in there that probably isn't quite right, and that's 10 years on. So I kind of got it pretty much right there, but I missed the point, which was the insulin. And then Fat and Furious was, again, a bit more knowledge, started to work with a lot more doctors, meet a lot more people. And then the very, very latest one, the insulin problem. Just quickly show that, because quite interesting. So that's my tree on the front that shows how all these diseases are all linked together. And then you start to realize that the exercise works because it lowers the insulin. The good night's sleep works because you're not so stressed. If you're not stressed, you haven't got so much cortisol. The food works because we're eating real meats, we're eating, real fish, we're eating, nuts and seeds and things that don't put your insulin up. And then when your insulin's down and you get into a calorie deficit, whether I don't know, do you have 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day, OMAD?
Yeah, so I'm probably 4 meals a day, and I'll have rice, curry, potatoes, fish, and probably yogurt in the morning, maybe a little bit of dark chocolate with that. And then in the evening, it might be something small. It might be something like a chicken wrap. That would be like a standard approach to a day.
Yeah, so I mean, you're not putting insulin up much at all with that. And if you are, it's not that bad for you because you're exercising quite a lot. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at people's eating patterns. I've got a video coming out on YouTube in about a month's time. On my last DEXA scan, I was gutted because I had lost some muscle mass, and I love my weight training, so I'd lost some muscle mass, and I'd spent the year before OMADing virtually every day, and what we're now finding is OMAD's good, but I wasn't getting enough protein in. I just, a 1 meal a day, which works great for me, and it's kept the weight off really easily. But I just wasn't getting enough protein in. So now I'm flicking between 2 meals a day and OMAD, 1 meal a day. But if it's a day where I'm training, I'm certainly not doing OMAD anymore. I'm certainly on a training day because I just can't get enough protein in.
I need to eat before I train, and I like to get probably my biggest meal of the day in after training. And then my meals after that will just be enough to keep me going. But I try not to eat too big a meal because, I need to teach classes or I need to edit, and if I'm sleepy because I'm digesting this big meal, then that's not great, So that's my approach to it.
If somebody's sitting, this is why we always have to put these things into context. If somebody's sitting and having a sports gel and not exercising, it's a disaster because the insulin's going to go sky high. But if you're in the context of you're out there running and you need an energy spike because maybe you've used all your glycogen up, well, then you've got no choice. You've got to have it. And you use your glycogen up and your muscles are soaking up any sugar anyway. So, not an issue. It's like, back to, you just said you're an advocate of fruit. I'm an advocate of fruit when somebody's healthy. If somebody's trying to lose weight, most fruits are the last thing they should be eating. Berries are an exception. All the berries, the blackberries, strawberries, blueberries, they're all an exception. And I'd say avocado's an exception. But other than that, if somebody's trying to lose weight and they've just had a big meal, then have an apple afterwards, well, you're just putting more sugar on top of sugar. But if somebody's already starting to get quite healthy and is exercising quite a lot, then absolutely, fruit, great, full of all sorts of good things that are good for us. But telling someone to have a banana that's trying to lose weight, what a disaster. So much carbs and sugar in it. But you're already exercising and the weight's already coming off, then I would never say don't have a banana.
Okay, so this is interesting, and I think it's a little fork off the road that I want to go down with you. But fiber, everybody talks about protein. We need protein. We need protein for muscle. Protein can help with satiety. Fiber is something that we don't necessarily chat about in the same way. It's not like everybody's buying a fiber yogurt or a fiber smoothie in my gym. They're all about the protein smoothies. So what is it for you about fiber, and who should be looking at their fiber?
Okay, so again, probably full disclosure for everybody, I have written a book on fiber called The Fiber First Diet, 1,000-page book, loads of research. And I do own a supplement company that sells fiber supplements. So With that caveat,
Helpful. Yeah.
with that caveat, what's my view on fibre? So the government say you should have 30 grams a day. Data suggests that only 1 in 20 people, in fact less than that now, get 30 grams a day. You would expect me to sit here saying everybody should have 30 grams a day because I've written a book on it and I sell fibre supplements. But I don't actually say that. And also, the British Medical Journal wrote that probably our ancestors were on about 100 grams of fibre a day. So even the 30 might be a bit low. But I don't agree with that, right? I think we have to have some fibre. For sure, we have to have some fibre because the gut relies on it, the microbiome relies on it. And I've got friends and doctors that are carnivore, for example, and they go, well, we don't get any fibre, which you can't if you're a carnivore. It's impossible. It only comes from plants. And we're not suffering. And I have to say to them, really good point, because some of these are like super fit and healthy, and Anthony Shafee in Australia, Sean Baker in America. I mean, these guys are winning gold medals at, sports and all sorts of things, and they look fantastic with zero fibre. And you could argue that the Inuits and the Eskimos never had fibre. But there's so much research that says we need it for our gut. So I think you need some fibre. I'm sitting here drinking, it's not one of my products, but some fibre water. We need some fibre. But fibre is the antidote to sugar. So in nature, we've never had sugar in anything without fibre. It's the antidote. Nature put fibre and sugar together. And what fibre does, slows down absorption. It's almost like a GLP-1 in itself. Makes us feel full. It's good for the microbiome. Has 0 calories that us humans can absorb energy from because we don't have any enzymes to break them down. So my point is this: if you're eating a lot of carbs, you need fibre. And the more carbs you eat, the more fibre you need to offset it. If you see on the back of a packet that something's got 40 grams of carbs and 1 or 2 grams of fibre, the fibre is irrelevant. It's hardly offsetting anything. Needs to be at least a quarter of it to be relevant. So if somebody's on a high fibre diet, a high carb diet, they need a high fibre diet as well. If somebody's on a very low carb diet, they probably don't need as much fibre.
Okay. The reason
and I
why
could talk about that all day because obviously that's my area of expertise. But I wanted to paint a picture that's gone. And if somebody said to me, "What have you changed the most in your opinion on food in the last, say, 3 or 4 years?" I was just banging that drum. Even before I wrote the fibre book, you need 30 grams a day. That's what the NHS tell us. Even that's probably too low because British Medical Journal said we used to eat 100 grams a day. I'd bang that drum that went, everybody needs 30 grams. Everybody needs 30 grams. But the more I've looked into the science, if you're on a very low carb diet anyway, ketogenic diet, you probably don't even need 30 grams a day.
you said something that I think would confuse people from a traditional standpoint, that, give somebody an apple, that's a nightmare. Is this because of what you've just said? If it's 40 grams of sugar and it's 2 grams of fibre, apple's quite low fibre. Is that why you'd say it's a nightmare? Because I know berries are relatively high fibre, aren't they?
I'm a massive fan of fruit, but if we're trying to help somebody lose weight, we have to then consider the apple compared to, let's say, I don't know, something else I might be eating, spinach or meat or chicken or lentils or whatever it is, and the apple has a lot of sugar in it. It will put the apple will put your insulin up because you're adding more sugar on top of sugar on top of sugar. You will put your insulin up, therefore it's making it much harder to lose the body weight. You could sit there because Jack looks really healthy and he's exercising a lot. You could have apples all day, no issue whatsoever. But the apple today doesn't have the fibre in it used to have, because not only have the big food companies taken the fibre and stolen the fibre out of all the packaged foods, all the fruits are bred today to have less fibre in them, because fibre slows absorption means you eat less food. And if you eat less food, you make less money. So very few things today have the fibre in it that they used to have in it. And if somebody wants to have fruit for the polyphenols and all the antioxidants, my normal go-to would be the berries, because the type of sugar in there doesn't put your insulin up as much. It's not mainly glucose, there's xylitol, all sorts of other sugars in the berries. I call them the Fab Four. Avocados, and the ones that I would never recommend would be any of the dried fruits. If you look at sultanas and things like that, they are nothing but sugar. A sultana has more sugar in it than a Tic Tac. So dried fruits, I try not to recommend to anybody at any point. My kids have bananas because they're growing, but anybody that's trying to lose weight, I'd put that on the list with Coca-Cola. Don't eat bananas. Yes, they've got potassium in them. In fact, an avocado's got more than a banana. But unless you're in good health, these are fruits that are designed to make you put on weight. Most fruits are out there in the autumn. We don't have off switches for fruit, because that's how we, in the autumn, what did the human body want to do around the world? Our ancestors was put weight on when all the fruits came out to get us through the winter. Fruits are full of fructose. They're designed for us to put on weight. That's the number one reason that humans consumed fruits, was to put on weight. So if the goal is weight loss, be very, very careful with the fruits, with the exception of the berries. Definitely never fruit juices from a supermarket, right? So you go and buy your orange juice or your apple juice, turn around the back of the box. There should be some fiber in there, right? Most of them. Have a look. Go in the supermarket, turn around the back of any fruit juice, apple juice, orange juice. Virtually, most of them have zero fiber. Some might have a fraction of fiber in there. Well, that shouldn't happen, should it? It just shouldn't happen. And an experiment I did for my Fiber First book, which is quite interesting. We took 10 volunteers, 5 male, 5 female, from young. The oldest, I think, was 65, some healthy, some unhealthy. And what we did for 2 weeks with these 10 volunteers was we did pair testing. So not pairs as in fruit, but pair testing. So one day they would go and choose their favourite McDonald's and eat it. And they'd be wearing the CGM, and we'd see what it did to their blood sugar level. The next day we made them have something high in fibre first. It could be nuts, seeds, sometimes it was a supplement. Then they had to have exactly the same McDonald's, and then we looked at what happened to the blood sugar level. Then we did it with Domino's pizza. Then we did it with all different things, Then we did it with orange juice and apple juice. And by putting the fibre first, on average across the 10 volunteers over 14 days doing every meal, the difference in blood sugar spike by having fibre first was around 50% less. So if your blood sugar spike is 50% less, that means less insulin, you get to lose body fat quicker. And the other problem with back to fruit is a lot of that sugar isn't glucose, it's actually fructose, the bit that tastes sweet in there. Fructose never gets into the bloodstream. So you might go, oh, that's okay then, because if it doesn't get in the bloodstream, it can't put insulin up. But it puts your insulin up in a different way, because fructose, the reason you never have a fructose monitor is it never enters the bloodstream. Way too dangerous to the bloodstream. So the liver has to convert it, and what it converts most of it into is body fat. De novo lipogenesis, the process of turning sugars into body fat in the liver. But the process of turning the fructose, which doesn't give you energy, by the way, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Is fructose even a food because it doesn't give you energy? It just turns into body fat in the liver, never gets into the bloodstream, so it can't give you energy. In fact, if you think about it logically, it's probably detracting from your energy, the opposite to what you think. So on the front of the packet, it says full of vitamin C to give you energy. So mum and dad giving kids the orange juice before they go to school, because on the front it says vitamin C gives you energy. But if it never leaves the liver, because it's been converted into body fat, de novo lipogenesis, then its main job is to store body fat.
Steve, I think there are going to be
Discuss.
some furious internet searches going on here.
Because I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I love my fruit.
Yeah.
But I love it now that I've got the weight off. I now know that when I was running, when I was obese, and I was getting home and having my couple of bananas in the morning because I was told they were full of potassium, it was adding to the problem. And the orange juice I was drinking, which is orange juice, which is good for you, was adding to the problem, because I was only running for an hour in the morning while I was obese, damaging my knees. I probably only burnt off in an hour 700 or 800 calories. I was doing more than that in the banana and the orange juice, overcompensating, and then wondering why for 30 years I was obese, yet I was not lazy. I wasn't lazy.
Yeah.
For you bodybuilders and people watching your podcast, Fitness and Thinking, probably fruit is your best friend or one of your best friends. But if you're trying to help somebody lose quite a lot of weight, it's probably not part of the solution.
You'll see things now labeled not high protein, but just protein, contains protein. And protein's the buzzword because people know that they should be getting it. And they think that they don't have enough of it, or if they eat more of it, they're being more healthy. But then if you go over the amount of food that you need, as we're alluding to earlier on in this discussion, then you will gain weight. And so it doesn't matter how healthy the things are that you consume. If you have too much, it's still too much.
Yep.
And weight gain will happen. I do think as well with juices, as you described, they've got vitamins in. Surely they should be good for me. It's liquid calories. There's nothing there to buffer it, to pad it out. As you say, the fiber's gone. It's about making it simpler.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you just hit the nail on the head there, Jack. Where you can, eat your calories, don't drink it. In all of human existence, we've never drank calories. The body's only designed to eat calories. So that's why coffee, tea, they're all fine because there's no calories in coffee and tea. Where you can, eat your calories, don't drink it.
Yeah.
So let me give you probably what I think the best bit of advice I was given. I sell a whole load of things. Blood pressure monitors. I've got a machine that we invented that you have at home, measures your cholesterol, measures your triglycerides, measures all the things that will tell you what's happening with insulin inside your body, right? Forget BMI, the most misunderstood, it was designed for population studies, not individual studies. BMI is the most waste of time. Virtually every one of your bodybuilders will have a BMI on a BMI scale that an insurance company would go, oh, that's horrific, because just bodybuilders do have a very high BMI. You could have 6 or 7% body fat and have a high BMI if you're really muscly, right? So your BMI will be terrible. My BMI is terrible. It's a measure, a number that's irrelevant, right? The number one measure, you take a piece of string and cut it to your height. You take that piece of string and you wrap it around your belly button at waist height. It should go round twice. So in other words, your waist should be half of your height. It's the best measurement of all because it works for everybody, male, female, because we know the only fat that we really should be worried about is the fat round the middle. Yeah, ladies might want to get rid of the bingo wings, men might want to get rid of it in certain areas and whatever. But the only fat that's dangerous is the fat around the middle, the visceral fat. So you should be able to get a piece of string, cut it off your height, tie it around your waist twice. If it won't go round twice, that means you're carrying too much here for your height. The question was, when do you know to eat fruit or not? So my number one test all the time, I do all these measurements every day because that's what I'm into. But the simplest one is, once that string won't go around twice, which probably happens to me towards the end of the summer, probably happens at the end of Christmas, just a little bit. And we've got a scale. It's all in my app, a scale that goes, you're out by that amount, which means this or means that. If it'll go around twice, have as much fruit as you want. In fact, don't even obsess about the potatoes and the carbs and the rice and all those things. But if it won't go round twice, you've probably got a bit of an issue with insulin. You've probably got a little bit of insulin resistance going on. And when people hear insulin resistance, they think it's either on or off. It's all cells in the body. It's not. You know what I mean? It happens at various places in the body. My mom, it's in the brain. She's got Alzheimer's. My dad has got type 2 diabetes. He's got it in other places. But you've probably got some insulin resistance going on if the string won't go around twice, and therefore your food choices have to be a bit more refined. And therefore, if you want fruit, think about the things that won't put your insulin up, which is all the berries, your avocados, and watch those fruits that would put your insulin up.
Amazing. Steve, so far it's been a lot crunchier than I expected, which is
sorry.
Cool. No, it's obviously good. This is fiber to what can otherwise be, high sugar conversation, that it's just sound bites. But actually, I think people will need to interrogate some of this and go and research some things. I think there's plenty for people to chew on, which is amazing. If we've not covered anything that you'd like to get into, maybe that you don't get asked about, or that you're on the cusp of researching at the moment that's kind of piqued your interest?
I said 10 years ago my job would be to try and reverse as many people's diabetes as possible. And through the work with the Public Health Collaboration and a few of the other charities I work with, we've helped a lot of people on that. I think I'm swinging more now to helping people lose weight because I'm so worried about 3 years down the line from now what we find out about GLP-1s. The evidence is starting to show, we've talked already about obviously the muscle loss being a big danger. We've seen the research now and the science showing that the weight gain does come back when you stop. But there's also starting to be evidence that just like anything in life, persistence leads to resistance. So if you keep jabbing and you're having to put more in and more in and more in because the brain starts to stop listening to the GLP-1, that eventually you become GLP-1 resistant in the sense that it stops listening to that signal to say that you're full, which means not only does it stop working on all the other levels, it stops working because you become resistant to it. Most people come off it within the 2 years anyway. The NHS, even if you manage to get in the NHS, it's only a 2-year thing. What is life like 6 months after, 12 months after you've stopped? And we know most people just put the weight back on. And back to what we said earlier on, you're in a worse position now because you haven't got the muscle you had before. So I think what my area of concern at the moment, the thing we're researching most is the weight loss drugs and the fact now it's coming in pill form. Very worried about that. And it's not to say it's not right for everybody. For some people, it's a lifesaver. But it's like we talk about insulin, insulin's a lifesaver, but you don't want too much of it.
No. If we could put exercise into a pill, then it would be the most bought, consumed thing going, wouldn't it?
I almost cried at school gates the other day. A lady I know really well, who I'd not coached, in any sort of engaged manner, but she'd always come and ask me questions. And she said, "Oh, you're looking quite fit." I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm hitting the gym a bit more than I did last year." She said, "Oh, I don't go to the gym anymore." And I went, "What?" She said, "Yeah, I was really into it, but yeah, it takes a lot of time. And I'm on the GLP-1 drug now, Steve, and I don't need to go to the gym anymore." And I'm like, "Oh my God. This is the opposite. It's the opposite. You need to go to the gym more now, not less now, because you'll be losing muscle mass, especially if your body's used to training and now you've stopped training and you're losing weight so quickly because you're on the drug. I mean, it's frightening.
Yeah.
It's frightening. If you get the GLP-1 through the NHS, they should almost prescribe gym membership for you. You know what I mean? And you have to, I don't know, have to wear a bloody tag that shows you were in Pure Gym or the gym group, or you have to prove that you did XYZ exercise this month before you can have next month's injection. It's that dangerous.
Nature, nurture, knowledge, environment, words that are coming to mind for me now. If you're around people that are all on GLP-1s, then that becomes normalized behavior. You don't see any issues with it. In fact, you all see this rapid weight loss. It's exactly what you dreamed of. Great. We'll keep on doing this thing. Maybe you become super fit. You're the person in the group who decides that they're going on the fitness streak. They're going to train for the marathon. They're going to train for a bodybuilding show. They're going to do something that the friendship group wouldn't do. You get ostracized there.
Yeah.
But hopefully, when you make a progressive step for what you want, you find the people around you. Because then when you have the network of people that are behaving in a way that is virtuous, that is positive and progressive, then it becomes easier to do the thing. Maybe you have a bad day and you eat your feelings. And then the next day you feel rubbish, because you've overconsumed all this food that you wouldn't normally. You're basically food hungover.
Yes.
And so now maybe you're thinking, oh, well, I'll just have, just one beer tonight, or just a slice of cake relative to the 3 that I had yesterday. And then you end up going on this depressive cycle. You end up on the downslide. But similarly, in the other direction, if you have a day where you feel really good and you fall asleep and you feel refreshed in the morning and you're not hungry, you have a cold glass of water, you feel ready to take on more stuff, and you take on more stuff, and you feel able to take on more stuff, and, that these things are naturally cyclical.
Yep.
But you need the people in your life to help you with it. You actually need to be responsible. And that's the environment bit, isn't it?
In all my research, the thing that is absolute, I'm adamant about, is anybody that's overweight is not their fault. So, if you watched the 1966 World Cup final and you watched the people walking into the ground, find those old videos, you won't see a single person overweight. I go and stand at Aston Villa, which has been a bit better this year. And I would say that 90 out of 100 people sitting around me are obese. Same sort of people, same demographic, same love of the same sport. From nobody, the year I was born, 1966, nobody to now virtually everybody. So that can't be the individual's fault. Something's gone wrong. And yet more people now are exercising than back then. Jogging wasn't even a thing in 1966, right? So more people are exercising. The gym group have got Cut 100 now, and Pure Gym and Virgin Gym, and look how many gyms we've got. And I'm in them a lot, and I love them, and I see a lot of people exercising. We're exercising more than we've ever done. The system's changed, the food's changed, the food industry has changed, what we eat has changed. Not their fault. But what you just said is so important. But it is their responsibility to fix it, because nobody's going to do it for you. And you can fix it potentially with a GLP-1, but we think it's a short-term solution that isn't there, won't work in the long term. And what you just said, the tribe you surround yourself with is so important, isn't it? And that's in everything in life, isn't it? You are the sum. I can't remember the number or the data. You might know better than me,
They usually
Jack.
say 5
It's
people.
something, 5 people down there. You are the sum of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. Yeah. That is so true. So true. And if the tribe around you and you're trying to get fit, and they'll always say they love you the way you are, because they do, because they love you and you're overweight. They love you the way that they won't want you to lose the weight, some of them, because that's the way they know you. And even if they love you a lot, you're losing weight and they're not. So the best thing you can do, I'm not saying leave your partner or anything, but find a new tribe. You might not be able to change your loved one straight away, but find a new tribe, maybe go to that gym. I'm not a big fan of advocating running till the weight starts to come off, only because of A, overcompensation, B, the damage it does to your knees. I've had 2 ACL replacements when I was jogging all those years, and I still struggle with my knees now, even though I'm not overweight. And I love my sport. But having said that, what I was moving on to, the park runs, how fantastic is that? All those people going out and doing the park runs, and, get down the gym, find new people. Weight training is not something for just bodybuilders. Weight training is something everybody should be doing. In fact, the older we get, the more we should be doing it, because of sarcopenia. I'm 60. I always used to train quite a lot, but I think it's more important now. Shouldn't be stopping now. This is when I, once I know what the amount I should be doing, this is now when I shouldn't skip a session, because muscle loss is a real thing the older we get. So, everybody should be doing some resistance training. Everybody should be moving a bit more. Everybody should be doing some aerobics, especially zone 2 aerobics. Go and get a new tribe. Go and find something that you enjoy. And, and I'll never stipulate it should be gym work or this work or that work. Go and find something you enjoy. Might be tennis, might be the new pickle sports, paddle or pickle, or go and find something you really enjoy doing, because that's the thing you'll stick at.
Yeah. Part of me just thinks we could go forever, Steve. But from the top of the conversation to now, I think there's something like super actionable and real about what we've said, Yeah. Amazing,
Diagrams, Jack, you need diagrams.
We need diagrams. Is there a specific place you'd want to send people to first?
If you're trying to lose weight, I think my book, The Fiber First Diet, don't be put off. I mean, I can talk, that's why it's 1,000 pages, but the answer's in the first couple of 100 pages. The rest is all the science behind the link from elevated insulin to cancer to diabetes and all that, all the science there. But the first couple of pages explains why 99% of diets fail, because they tell you to give something up, and that's not human nature. So the Fiber First Diet was all about, don't give up anything, just put fiber first, because we know that if you have more fiber, you don't get the blood sugar spike, therefore you don't get the insulin spike, therefore you lose weight quicker. And then what tends to happen once you put your fiber up, eventually you just stop eating the stuff you shouldn't be eating without being told not to. And so we know the fiber first approach works. And then my app is Clubwell. It's completely free. I track everything in there. And a lot of people are getting really healthy with it.
We'll put all those links into the description, Steve, and thank you very much for your time.
Oh, I've loved it. Thanks, Jack. Thanks for having me on.
Fitness and Thinking is a free weekly newsletter and podcast that is fascinated with 6 pillars of fitness: the physical, mental, social, emotional, spiritual, and financial states of being. And most weeks we're catching up with experts, practitioners, and generally great people to discuss the big and the small, the smart and the sometimes delulu. And every single chat has gone in a direction that I've not necessarily expected. If you want more of it, it would mean the world if you could leave a comment, say what you like, what you dislike, who you'd like on, what we've not covered, what we could have gone into more depth with, and if you could subscribe to see what we get up to based on your feedback.